The question is that the bill be now read a second time. The Assistant Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. This bill is about building renewable-powered transport for the next generation, making sure that we have those great pieces of infrastructure that really do so much more than just get us around, but actually bring our country together. As I reflected on this bill, I remembered the first time I got on a high-speed train, the Eurostar, travelling at 300 kilometres an hour. And a bit like the first time that you sit in an electric car and you go vroom, you do not forget that first acceleration. It's exactly the same on an electric train and indeed on a high-speed electric train, which this bill will enable to become a reality here in Australia, something which has been talked about for decades and decades. I remember as a child slightly smaller technology when it came to Perth, when we transferred the Perth rail network from diesel to electric trains. That happened in 1992. I remember the Transperth officers coming to my primary school, giving us the education about how we needed to be safe around electric trains, which even involved a slightly naff but nevertheless memorable Maggie the Magpie, who would tell us how to properly behave around electric trains. And while Perth has electric trains, I acknowledge that we won't be part of this initial part of the high-speed rail rollout, but nevertheless, as an Australian, I'm excited. And maybe I can have a little bit of hope in my heart that while we have high-speed rail for the east coast of Australia, connecting communities, for Western Australia and those of us who travel across the country regularly, maybe Qantas and Virgin will start to get serious about investing in the next generation of supersonic airliners that are being developed currently. This High-Speed Rail Authority bill is an example of bringing the country together, creating faster, more efficient connections for our cities and our regions, giving people more freedom about where they choose to live, where they choose to work, where they choose to holiday, and being able to more affordably stay in touch with family and friends. I agree with the previous speaker that we should not use infrastructure as a political tool. We should use infrastructure to grow our nation. Investing in infrastructure is about investing in the future of Australia, and this is about a better future for all Australians. It gives people stronger connections and it will open up new opportunities for business. We also know that this does have a grounding in good economics for our country. Previous studies by the Department of Infrastructure have found that the benefits of a high-speed rail network go well beyond travel times, unlocking regional economies, creating jobs, significant boost for the economy in the medium and the long term. A report by the University of New South Wales found that the adoption of a high-speed rail network across the east coast could result in $140 billion of value uplift. This will make it easier to live in our vibrant regional centres. And we know that the studies completed in 2013 on the Phase 2 rail study released by the previous Labor government showed that for every dollar spent, there would be $2.30 of economic benefit. That's before you go on to all of the social and environmental benefits. And as I said, this technology is about building renewable-powered public transport that can give people more choices about how they get around this great country. And this is not a new idea. The idea of a high-speed rail link between Melbourne and Sydney was first proposed in 1984 by none other than the CSIRO. We know that 20 years before that, Japan introduced their high-speed rail network in 1964. We saw in the 1980s Europe begin to build their network, which now operates across France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Belgium, the United Kingdom and Netherlands. And China, who only started building such a network in 2008, now boasts one of the world's largest, 37,000 kilometres of lines in operation. Needless to say, it's Australia's turn. We know that if we get this done here, the technology is there. Yes, we have unique and beautiful geography that will be a challenge for those who seek to build this, but the preservation of the corridors has already begun. We now just need to start planning that first link that the member for Newcastle spoke about a few moments ago, the Newcastle to Sydney link. I mentioned before that this does have unique benefits when it comes to the question of climate change. This is a technology that's uniquely placed to take advantage of our 80% renewable energy mix, which we will meet by 2030. The International Energy Agency tells us that rail is already the most electrified transport sector. 3/4 of passenger rail runs on electricity worldwide. Half of rail freight operates on electricity. So if we are going to tackle that big challenge of decarbonising the transport sector, we need to be serious about expanding the rail networks that operate in Australia. We know that when you compared to aviation, high-speed rail uses 90% less energy than aviation per passenger kilometre. When we look at a country like Australia, that makes a huge difference, and we know that people want these transport alternatives. On a very simple basis, as someone who loves, as you could probably tell, Deputy Speaker, loves being in those modern, fast versions of transport, one of the things I always appreciate about being in a train rather than an aeroplane, and I studied aviation when I was young, and I love the aviation sector, but the windows are just a little bit bigger on a train, and in a country as beautiful as Australia, to be able to sit going from the member for Whitlam's electorate at a very beautiful part of the world, and I'm sure it's equally beautiful at 300 kilometres an hour. So that's why we need this essential, independent, impartial body for the effective and responsible development of Australia's new high-speed rail system. The authority will bring together state and territory governments, industry, business, communities to optimise our nation's first long-term investment in fast rail. The first priority, of course, being an updated analysis of the commencement of work on that fast, reliable, cost-effective connection between Sydney and Newcastle, part of eventually connecting Sydney all the way up to Brisbane. The High Speed Rail Authority will provide expert advice on policy and standards. It will secure the corridors necessary to build this nation-building project and allow for the wider expansion of the network over time, eventually bringing in Canberra, Sydney, Melbourne and many regional centres throughout. This is about vision, and it's also about knowing that if you want to do something that requires long-term planning, you've got to act quickly, and that's why in the first 4 months of this government we're bringing this legislation, because we are 100% committed to making sure that the talk turns into bureaucratic action, the bureaucratic action turns into policy action, and then we actually start building this thing. So, over time, we won't be debating the legislation about the authority, but I'm sure we'll see members from all over this chamber start to advocate as to why it should stop in their particular town or why it should have an extra train service from time to time. And I look forward to the day that we have a granular debate like that, because that will be the time where we have had a truly successful implementation of the high-speed rail network that Australia has waited for so long. I commend the bill to the House.